call the meeting to order of the Board of Education of the Kaneland Community Unit School District 302. We would like to inform all board member attendees that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion, and we will rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Did you switch chairs with me?
I didn't.
Mrs. Sparber.
Here.
Mrs. Junk.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mrs. Witt.
She's here. Oh, here.
Mr. Rebus and Mr. Carey are absent.
Okay, and we expect them to be coming in a bit. So we do have a quorum with 5 members present, and would anyone like to move something from consent to new business? No? Okay, so we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Gail, Aaron, you want a second?
I'll second.
All right, and a roll call.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0, so we'll move on to Superintendent Sluse.
Thank you, President Sparber. Mrs. Maris just let us know about 10 minutes ago that her daughter is sick, so I am substitute Mrs. Marising right now on her behalf. And if you recall, at the last board meeting, we recognized our Illinois State Scholars, and a number of them could not attend for various other activities going on. So what we have is the list of the 10 that weren't recognized last time. So we're going to take a second to recognize the remaining Illinois State Scholars. So if you are one of those scholars and you're here, please come up, and then we will recognize you, and then we'll also make sure that we get a picture afterwards. So come on up, please. Also, not being Mrs. Maris, I don't know these students as well as she would, so I'm going to do my best to pronounce their names, and then if I pronounce it wrong, I'll let you guys clarify it, okay? Again, for Illinois State Scholars, they represent approximately 10% of high school seniors from the 738 high schools across the state of Illinois. Illinois State Scholars possess strong academic potential and are chosen based on a combination of exemplary ACT and SAT test scores, and also their semester or their class semester rank. So we have our students up here, and Anna Carlson? No, okay. Alex Buchanan? No. No. Good, okay. It's about 20 letters, but I'm going to give it a shot. It's Danya Chandrasekharan. So. All right, A+ there, C- right here. So, thank you. I was close. Mabel Cummins, Macy Hittmeyer, Dallin Wong, Brianna Kigios, Kennedy O'Connor. Come up, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kennedy O'Connor. I'm obviously a senior. I live in Montgomery. I don't know, am I supposed to give a little life story or just?
That's enough.
Okay, thanks, nice.
I'm sure it's a great story, though. Paige Rowley.
That's me.
Paige, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Paige. I live in Sugar Grove. Yeah.
Thanks, Paige. And our last scholar was Samantha Simmons. So if you would, please join me in congratulating our state scholars. And then also what we'll do is we'll get a picture out in the hallway quick, and we'll make sure that we update that. So look for that. Look for your picture along with a small article in the next KCM. Okay? Congratulations. Thanks for coming out. Congratulations. And thank you for having easy last names. Thank you. That was all we had, President Sparber.
So now we'll move on to public comment. The board values public input to inform our decision making and to provide information and insight into what is happening throughout the district. Board meetings are held to conduct the business of the Board of Education and are required by law to take place in public. However, they are not public forums. We use the public comment section as an opportunity to listen to our stakeholders. For that reason, the board does not enter into debate or respond to questions spontaneously or without proper investigation or deliberation. In deliberation, in most cases, concerns or questions requiring follow-up will be referred to the superintendent. If you choose to speak publicly, we ask that you stand, state your name and village of residence or your association with us for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less so that all who wish to speak may have that opportunity. You are encouraged to seek a private appointment to discuss matters concerning individual students or staff members. While public education can be an emotional issue, and understandably so, the board strives to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meeting. Those who speak are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility. The floor is now open to public comment. And if there is a public comment, if you could go to the microphone. Any public comment? Nope. All right. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Tonight, the consent agenda contains the following action items: the approval of the treasurer's report, February 2019, approval of accounts payable of the Fox Valley Career Center, February 2019, approval of parameters for accounts payable and payroll, March 2019, approval of minutes of the February 25th, 2019 regular meeting, approval of resignations and employment of staff, approval of Illinois High School Association membership for 2019-2020, approval of Fox Valley Career Center joint agreement, approval of annual Board of Education purchase of student artwork, approval of discretion of audio recordings from the closed session meeting from August 2017, approval of bids, general contractor for concrete, science classrooms, and outside door replacement, and the following informational items: the student suspension data report and the Freedom of Information Act request report. All right, having said that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. So we'll move on to new business. J1, approval of Board of Education meeting schedule for 2019-20.
Yes, thank you. Annually, the Board of Education this time of year adopts the meeting schedule for the following school year. So tonight's consideration is for the 2019-2020 school year. And as you look through the dates in J1, they are all corresponding dates. So if you will, just as a reminder, corresponding dates, and there's 2 Wednesdays. Wednesday, October 16th is due to Columbus Day, and then the Wednesday, May 27th is the Memorial Day holiday in this way. So both of those are then moved to the corresponding Wednesday. The one thing that is a departure from the previous 2 years, you'll see in August, there's a recommendation for just the August 26th board meeting. 4 years ago, either 3 or 4 years ago, we had just one meeting in August. We added the earlier meeting for hiring purposes only, so it was a real short meeting, and it was just any last-minute hires before the actual start of the school year. But as we looked at the calendar with moving the school year a week earlier, that date that would have been on that meeting is August 12th, sorry, and that's the first day of the open houses and back-to-school nights. So that is one of the busiest nights of the year, and I know board members, either that want to get into buildings or that have children in buildings, are going to want to be in buildings that night, not at a board meeting. And also, as we hire, it's always pending board approval, so any of the hires that we would have that would come in would start the school year, but it would be pending board approval, and and that's part of a normal cycle we follow also. If we hire a maintenance person or if we hire a bus driver or any of the teachers, they would start and then serve until the next board meeting anyway. We still follow all the safety and procedures of hiring and fingerprinting and all of that. The formality is just for the board to approve them at the following board meeting. So I didn't know if you had any questions, but that was the reason for the departure of the August 12th. And what we can do then is we can see, as we roll the calendar forward, if it stays forward, we'll just see how many new employees maybe we missed, and then we can just reassess for the following school year. Any questions on these dates or this? And this also matches the 1920 calendar that we already approved. We made sure we looked at it to make sure that there's days of school on all of these days, and we're in session for all of them. Sounds good.
Any questions, comments? No? All right, so I'd like to entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the 2019-20 meeting schedule as presented. And there's a second?
Second.
Discussion? No one, a roll call.
Mr. Lawler,
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mrs. Barber,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
and Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. So move on to J2, approval of resolution authorizing reduction in force and honorable dismissal of non-tenured and tenured teachers.
Yes, as part of J2, I'd also like to thank Mr. Atkins for being here to present J2, 3, 4, and 5. They're all personnel and staffing that will be coming up, and so as we transition to these agenda items, I'm sure Mr. Atkins is also going to recognize a number of people from cabinet through ad team, and about 2 or 3 month process starting from student registration all the way through enrollment numbers. There's the legal process, there's timelines that we have to follow. So I'd like to just tell Mr. Atkins thanks for his work on this and the number of staff members, employees that we lead to this point to get our staffing plan put together. So with that, I'll let Mr. Atkins take it.
Thank you. Good evening. So our first order of business tonight is a resolution authorizing a reduction in force of selected personnel. A little bit of background. It's important to answer a question of why are we doing this before hearing about the minimum staffing plan, because the minimum staffing plan is predicated on the release of some of these staff, and so it's important that we do that first and then get into the sum totality of the minimum staffing plan. The other piece to recognize is that the state does require notice to educators about 45 days prior to the end of the school year, which is sometime in the middle of next week. And so it falls onto this board meeting for us to take this action and make these recommendations. So it is unfortunate that we have to do these things now at this point in the school year. At the same time, it is viewed to a little bit as a favor to those affected staff so that they have time during the spring hiring season with other districts to find other employment. And the third thing that I would point out tonight as we go through these next two resolutions is that these are honorable reductions in force or reductions from full-time to part-time. These people have done nothing wrong. They've served our district admirably and well. They've done a great service to our students. They are just in a position where enrollment is such that the programs are no longer being offered. So it's important to recognize that these are not resolutions due to performance. Quite the contrary, these are resolutions just due to enrollment. So the first one you have in front of you is a reduction in force of 2 of our staff. One is our culinary arts teacher at the high school. She teaches 1 period a day in the morning. We do not have enough registrants for that class in the coming year, so we are reducing that class, and thus the teacher. The other one is our Fox Valley Auto Shop instructor. There are not enough students to run as many sections of Auto Shop as we've had in the past, and with that reduction, he would be the person to be reduced. So what you have before you is a reduction in force, honorably, of both Fallon Oliver and Nathan Fuchs. Is there any questions from the board?
Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the resolution authorizing reduction in force and honorable dismissal of non-tenured and tenured teachers as listed in Schedule J2.
So moved.
Should we
I'll
say
second.
Ryan and Aaron will
I'll
second
second.
again? All right. And a roll call.
Mrs. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mrs. Barber,
Aye.
Mrs. Witt,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk, Mr. Carey,
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. We'll move on to J3, on approval of resolution authorizing notice to probationary and tenured teachers of an honorable reduction from a full-time to part-time position.
So similar to the resolution you just approved, this one is similar in that we are reducing a staff, but we are not releasing that staff fully. So currently, our law enforcement instructor is full-time. Next year, we only have enough students for 2 sections instead of 3, so he will be reduced from full-time to .66. So again, we'd like to thank Mr. Baker for the work he's done with our law enforcement students. We just don't have enough students registering for that coursework to justify the full-time staff. So that's the resolution in front of you for this, is to reduce them from full-time to part-time. So,
Any questions?
questions from the board?
I do have one question. I think you've mentioned before that part of the reason that there's low enrollment in these courses is because a lot of the other schools that participate are pulling back and covering these things in-house. And I'm just wondering if we're somehow, making sure or checking to see if there are any of these things that we need to add to our high school curriculum and pull some of these things in-house so that our students don't miss out.
It's a good question. At the last Fox Valley Career Center board meeting, the board meets 4 times a year, and we just met last week, and one of the things we talked about was the enrollment for the fall. And as part of the enrollment, we looked at programming, and so Dr. Burchell does have a charge for the summer into the fall to look at a potential of a staffing or a strategic plan that would be a program evaluation to see what current programs we have that are still viable, and then what new programs, if any, would be viable to move forward with. So that's going to be undertaken in the fall.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all.
Anything else? So I'd like to entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the resolution authorizing notice to probationary and tenured teachers of an honorable reduction from full-time 1.0 to part-time .66 position effective at the end of the 2018-19 school year.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. So we'll move on to J4, approval of minimum staffing plan for certified staff for 2019-20.
Thank you. So we have the minimum staffing plan ready to present to you. Before we begin, just a reminder that this is a minimum staffing plan, and the staffing of our district is always a dynamic process. The high school will always have registration changes throughout the summer. We always closely monitor elementary and middle school enrollments during the summer. If we get more students at a given site, as the board knows, we would come forward to you with a recommendation to increase or shift staffing as needed. And then also we monitor our special ed changes throughout the spring as many new students have the potential to become qualified or entitled for services towards the end of a school year. And so if any of those factors change, we would bring that to the board to make sure that the board was aware of what was going on with our needs from our students. So as Dr. Lade mentioned, I wanted to first thank the myriad of people involved in the minimum staffing plan. We have 22 administrators in our district, and all of them have had a role to play in this process at some point, whether that be a programmatic recommendation, shuffling of a schedule to make sure that we maximize our resources, advocacy for students in terms of entitlements, you name it. We've had a lot of people working very hard on this to make sure that we maintain the quality of education our students receive in this district, while at the same time maximizing the community's resources. So a thank you to all of those people. We have a couple of assumptions that we always like to share with the board. The first is that we do try to maintain adherence to the class size recommendations of kindergarten through second grade being 21 to 22 students, third through fifth being 22 to 24 students. Everyday kindergarten, we'd like to have a minimum of 16 and a maximum of 24. And then for middle school and high school, we want to keep class sizes at about 26 to 1. We do our best with that. Some classes may be a little over, a little under, but we do try to look at that across the board, across grade levels and across buildings. Our minimum staffing plan, I don't know if I'll say this enough tonight, it is a minimum staffing plan. Staffing is a dynamic process, and thus we are going to have a variety of things going on throughout the spring and summer. We'll continue to make sure that the board is updated on that. Real quick, kind of an end game statement here. Our FTE for next year is anticipated to grow by 5.9 FTE, and we'll go into detail about what those specific things are, but they are all due to programming, sectioning, registration, and enrollment. So and special education needs. So we want to make sure that the board knows we're not adding programming to add programming. We're adding programming because we need to have another section of English or another section of social studies, that kind of thing. We want to make sure that the board knows, too, that we are adhering to all the special education guidelines and laws that we're required to comply with as we look at our staffing model. Wanted to make sure the board knew that over the last several years, as enrollment has declined, so has our overall FTE for our staffing. Those numbers up there represent a gradual decrease in our staffing over time, which is commensurate with a decrease in our enrollment. It's important to know, too, that I'll share some enrollment figures with you tonight. And enrollment doesn't happen in pockets. It doesn't happen in consolidated areas. So, for example, were you to see a reduction of 70 students at the elementary level, that doesn't necessarily equate to 2 or 3 teachers, because it might be 5 students here and 2 students in this grade level and 2 students in that grade level, but not any one chunk of students in one place to justify a significant change in FTE. So it doesn't happen in pockets. Enrollments for Fox Valley Career Center, kindergarten and early childhood are still tentative. We have had our kindergarten enrollment and registration day, so we do have a good sense of what our enrollment for kindergarten will look like, and then we use a 5-year historical average to predict where kindergarten will end up. Fox Valley is still working with registrations of their students and with all the member districts, just like at any high school. If a student can't get into 3rd period algebra, they might have to go to their 2nd or 3rd or 4th choice, which could then impact Fox Valley. But for the most part, it's mostly done, but it's always that last little bit that can be a little bit of a challenge. And then our early childhood enrollment is a good predict. Again, we use a historical average to predict early childhood. Special education, please remember that when students are entitled for services, they're entitled for services, and those services come with staffing needs often, and that is something that we don't control and that we don't have the ability to say no to. If a student requires, for example, a one-on-one aid, or if enough students are found to be entitled for services at a given site that requires another teacher, we need to do that, and you'll hear specifically about some of that at the middle school level in a few minutes. You can see that at this time, elementary enrollment is down by about 57 students, but again, that's not 57 students from one grade level at one building, that's across 4 buildings and across 6 grade levels at each building. The middle school will see a decrease of 43 students, that's that last really big significant cohort from 8th grade going into 9th grade. And then, obviously, on the other side of that, high school will see an increase of 72 students next fall. Okay? So, student enrollment projections, you can kind of see a synopsis of the entire district here. I'll point out that in that second to last row, the 81 students in parentheses, those are outplaced students, so we're still responsible for them. We still keep track of them. We still service them through the special education department, but they go to school in other districts or other sites. So we're down 28 students total overall, and that is as of February 5th. So please know that some of these numbers can have already changed, will change, may go up, may go down, but if there's anything significant that the board needs to be aware of, we will absolutely make sure that they know that. The board asks that we share kind of a historical look of class sizes at the elementary school. So we do try to do that for you as well. And you can see here what our projected class sizes are moving into next year. And it is up 7/10 of a student. No, we're not chopping students into tenths, but nonetheless, we're up 7/10. And that does bring our building average for that 4-year average up to 22. So a slight increase at the elementary level in terms of class size. This is a chart that shows you where the plus and minus is for the district. So this is where that first of the 5.9 FTE come into play. If you'll look, you'll see that at the kindergarten level, when we did our registration the other day, we're up a little bit, which is good, but there's a significant cluster at Blackberry Creek. And because of that, we need to add another FTE at Blackberry Creek. So we have one of the 5.9 is going to kindergarten at KBK. The other movements that you see there, we are down 1 at Stewart, and that FTE is going to shift over to KBK's first grade to alleviate class size concerns at first grade there. So for the elementary level, we're up 1 FTE, but there's a shift of 1 FTE in there from one building to another. Covered a lot of ground. Any questions so far? No? Okay. This chart shows middle school and high school. Middle school is on the left, high school is on the right. You'll see two things in the middle school. The first is that our special education population is increasing at the middle school to such a degree that we need 2 more additional FTE at the middle school. That will allow us to have caseloads starting at about 13 or 14 to 1. The state caps at 15. So we have the capacity to add a couple of more special education students, and there are some that are in the caseload process right now being tested. So it's entirely possible that we'll start pretty close to capacity with special education, but nonetheless we will need those 2 additional educators at the middle school level.
When you say that one, I think you said it went up 19 at the middle school. Are you, like, is that an estimate for next year based on,
That's a hard count as of,
like, 5th graders you think will need services as 6th graders and the 8th graders who are leaving? And
those are 5th graders that we know to need services. That does not include those that are in the pipeline. If we did just a straight division, I believe we're at like 1.8, and that's why we're asking for 2, because then those remaining students that are in the process who, even if half of them are entitled, then we will need both of those FTE. Historically speaking, once a child goes into case study, they very infrequently don't end up with some sort of services, so that's why we're at the 2.0 FTE. You'll also see there that we have added in 0.4 for speech. So we're going to have an itinerant speech teacher. That 0.4 is actually for our early childhood program to provide walk-in speech to our services. The state provides an audit every year of early childhood services, and we have not been providing walk-in speech services the way that we need to. And so in order to comply with that indicator and that requirement, we're adding 2 days a week of early childhood. So we have an itinerant teacher or a part-time teacher who will be able to pick up that 0.4 and provide walk-in speech services to our little ones across the district. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're going to do that at our local preschools. So they're actually going to go out to local preschools and do that walk-in speech service. So we're very excited about that. With the high school, you'll see a variety of up and down there at the high school. The high school is increasing 1.5 FTE, but you can see there that we're up in one department, down in another department, but the all-in is 1.5 FTE. And that's that normal shifting and the very dynamic nature of high schools and what students register for. So any questions on the additional special education and speech staff or the additional 1.5 staff for the various departments at the high school?
The last meeting, we were going to have an additional person to help with the changes and all that.
Getting there.
Okay.
Coming next.
I just was trying to figure out
Yep.
where you're following your chart.
Not a problem. They're not on these charts because these are grade level specific charts. So they're going to, it's included in another graph I'll show you, not graph, but chart I'll show you in a minute.
Okay.
Absolutely. This is just a snapshot as of today of what staffing would look like for the entire district, because it is more than just our certified teaching staff. It's also our classified staff and our administrators. And so you just get a picture there of how many people we have in those various job categories. This, Mr. Ryan, is what I believe you were looking for. This just gives you an overall summary. We have our extended day kindergarten teacher at KBK. We have our 2 special education teachers at the middle school. We do have a teacher on special assignment for our one-to-one initiative. So if you recall, at our last board meeting in February, you heard from our team about the one-to-one initiative and what that was going to require. And one of those things was a teacher on special assignment to help our staff acclimate to the one-on-one environment, how to incorporate that into their instructional design, into their instructional delivery, how to help them with everything to do with these new boxes the kids are going to be coming into class with. And so that is 1 FTE there. And if you recall, as we talked about at that meeting at the end of February, those dollars for that FTE are going to come from some other existing sources of money. We have our 1.5 FTE at the high school, and we have our 0.4 walk-in speech for an increase all told of 5.9 FTE. So again, we have our kindergarten, our high school, our special education, and our TOSA for that 5.9 FTE. Questions from the board?
Does that include the include the retirement stuff?
That would include the retirement stuff, yes.
Dr. Fuchs, what's this do to your budget?
It tightens it quite a bit, but we should still be okay with a balanced budget, but it's darn close.
Okay. So we're
Because we
adding-
had a small surplus from the financial projections, and this pretty well,
So it puts us right about 0. Okay, that's where I
is that about where you're at?
in my head, yeah.
Yeah, it's,
Don't trust what's in my head.
yeah. I agree.
Okay.
You usually, this is outside of the usual 2 that you're off by, you play around with 2% usually, right? That's, it eats that up as well, what you're saying?
Yes, yes. So,
And I'd circle back around to thanking the rest of the administrative team. Please know that this recommended minimum staffing plan comes after hours and hours and hours of ensuring that we have utilized every single staff member, that we have maximized every single schedule, that we have looked at everything that we need to do, and this is what we need at a minimum to provide services to our students for next year.
and I would echo Mr. Atkins. I helped him with a lot of that. We worked on it together with regard to making sure that every I was dotted and T crossed in the sense of, do we really need this position? So, I don't disagree with the need. I don't.
No, that isn't the look on my face was not because of that. It was, there's things that are upcoming that we don't have cost determined for yet. So if we're at 0 and we approve this, we're probably actually at a negative number once we start adding in missing pieces.
Depending on how much we add in those missing pieces, I would concur.
So since 80-some% of our cost is staff, do we want to approve a minimum plan now that doesn't really give us the opportunity to cut staff later?
I don't know how you would not be able to approve a minimum staffing plan now in terms of being able to fill those positions and plan appropriately, because a lot of the changes here would mean significant impact on scheduling, course offerings, all those kinds of things.
I understand it's not a simple thing that I'm
Right.
asking, but at the same time, if we're gonna have a $500,000 in cost increase, just because I made up that number, I have no idea what's right. 80% of our cost is labor. So I guess my question is, if we approve this now, can we change it later?
You would be able to change it the following year and adjust at that time.
So, no.
That is correct. At this time, if it's the minimum staffing plan is approved, this is, as Mr. Atkins mentioned a few times, the minimum piece of it. That would be the minimum part of it. That don't go any lower than that based on the needs that we've figured out today.
I just making sure I'm going into it with all the right information, that's all.
Good question.
Yeah.
Right.
Because if we, after this, we can't raise class sizes or cut automotives, or we're locked into whatever this
By
says.
law, we are, yes.
Well, and we're using 60,000 as a placeholder for salaries, but we could go under that, right? That's assuming someone has a degree or has experience, right? So that number could go down. That number could go up, I mean, depending on what we have to buy, right? Yeah.
Right.
And Mr. Atkins has already shared with the administrative team, they need to do their very best with any hires to try to keep them at the first year of experience with a bachelor's degree.
Sure.
So that will help.
Quick
That will
clarification.
alleviate some of this.
Not
right.
yet, because we're waiting for the board meeting
Right.
tonight. But first thing tomorrow, yes, we're going to do
Exactly.
our best to look for those
Yeah.
people that are able to fulfill the role, meet the needs, and provide excellent service to our students, while at the same time making sure that we are financially responsible.
Yeah.
Sure.
That is the one piece we do control.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just to talk through it out loud, I guess, in my head, or however you say that, if, let's just make it up $500,000 because it's an easy number. So if we approve this and we come up $500,000 short, we can't do anything with staffing or personnel or anything next budget year. You said legally we're locked in, right?
The 1920 budget year.
1920 budget year.
Right,
That's,
yeah,
Next school year.
yeah.
so,
2021 was where we could
Make
recoup
adjustments.
that, or change that, yes.
so that means, I guess we could still cut projects or something if the goal was to balance the budget. That's,
The projects are already approved because we had to go out to bid and everything.
right, but the bids haven't been approved, but I guess we're not gonna have all the pieces of information before that comes back anyway.
Yeah, you had
So-
some bids approved tonight and the rest will be approved in April. Well, they'll be presented in April for approval then. So you're right, you could throw out all of those projects, the remaining ones.
Short of that, we're dipping into the fund balance if,
Yeah. Or the unknowns that you still mentioned,
yeah.
perhaps those could be controlled.
Well, yeah, I know, that's an unknown, I don't
Yeah.
know what that number is, that's,
Right.
okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Any other questions?
So this list is must-haves, we don't have a choice, some of these we don't have choices for. Are these falling as categories?
The teacher and special assignment was already approved with the one-to-one initiative. And then the remaining ones are ones that we need to meet programming needs for students at a minimum, yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So, I would like to entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the 2019-20 minimum staffing plan as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? And a roll call?
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Witt.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mr. Lawler.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Motion carries 7-0. We'll move on to J5, approval of stipends differential recommendations for 2019-20.
Okay, so I'd like to first, again, start off by thanking those members of the Joint Differential Stipend Committee. Every year, there is a committee comprised of 3 teachers and 3 administrators, and then the union president and myself as non-voting members who get together, who receive requests from staff around the district to add or change to our, make changes to our differential stipend allocations and our programming. That committee spends the entire month of February meeting every Tuesday for a couple of hours to hear those requests, to have discussion about the various pieces of data we have about our programming, to look at recommended programmatic changes, and then decide how best to acknowledge, move forward with the recommendation to the Board of Education. So I wanted to thank Matt Smith, Jill Maris, Mallory Sunday, Carrie Oslager, Mark Meyer, David Roman, and Mrs. Good for working on that committee with me. And I'm proud to say that they came up with a strong recommendation that they unanimously recommended for the board. So after looking at all of our data points, our activities audit, and our athletics, and ensuring that we had all of those things within accepted norms, athlete to coach ratios, and with our activities, making sure that we have a wide range of offerings, making sure that underrepresented students had opportunities for participation, making sure that we realigned things that either overlapped or were underutilized. We went through our process to make a recommendation. The Joint Committee met twice to review everything. There's a paper application process. We then informed all of the sponsors who had either requested increases or new programming as to whether or not their recommendation would go forward or not. We also informed some staff who were going to have adjustments made to their programming and invite them to come in and present to the Joint Committee on the 3rd Tuesday of every month. This year we had 3 different groups come in and present to us and share more information about what they do, some student testimonials, a variety of things. And after hearing that, the Joint Committee met again for a fourth time to deliberate on all of those, all that feedback, all that information, and make a recommendation. So the recommendation that they have for the board to consider tonight is to add one middle school services team leader. At the middle school level, there's a building leadership team leaders, that are paid a stipend to act as a liaison between the administration and the various teams at all the buildings. And the student services team has not had a team leader, and instead someone has been volunteering their time for the last couple of years to go in and act as the team leader with no pay. And it has come to a point where we absolutely would need to add that person into the mix to make sure that they can continue to be a liaison for our student services department. So if you figure about every team leader is responsible for about 14 to 15 staff, and this student services team leader would be responsible for all those people in the student services department. As you saw here, I believe it was last board meeting or maybe the one before, our FFA group was here. Mr. Thurwanger was up to present as well. Mr. Thurwanger has been volunteering his time with FFA. He and Mrs. Heinzen are doing a fabulous job with that. The program is growing, and they're doing a whole heck of a lot around our community and in our district. And Mr. Thurwanger presented a volume of evidence to us to indicate that adding him as a co-sponsor would be in the program's best interest and in our district's best interest. And after review, the committee agrees. We were asked to add a winter color guard sponsor. We used to have two. We combined them in the past. We were asked again this year to separate them yet again and have two separate sponsors. It's the same person, but two separate positions. And the committee, instead of having two separate committees or two separate sponsors, are keeping it together, but increasing it by a level to recognize the work that they do from the summer all the way through the winter season. But at the same time, it is a little bit less than having two separate sponsorships. And then we also aligned Model UN, Operation Snowball, and the GSA pay rates with other similar differentials. They were all at different various areas on the differential schedule, and so we aligned those down to where the other clubs of similar ilk were located so that we could keep those programs. Some of those programs don't have many students involved in them, but they do service underrepresented sections of our student population, and we want to make sure that those opportunities are still there. So with that realignment, we were able to add some of those requests and some of those programs, but then also make sure that we keep some of the other programming as well. So to kind of put it all together for you, we have the team leader, we have the co-sponsor for FFA. Oh, and by the way, Mr. Thurwanger did request a level higher than what the Joint Committee placed him at for that program, for that sponsorship. We have the combined fall-winter color guard, and then we have Model UN Operation Snowball and the GSA with their realigned rates, and that would have a total budgetary impact of $2,600. So we feel we've met all the needs of our students with this recommendation.
Any questions or comments? All right, so then I'd like to entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the adjustments to the 2019-20 differential stipends as presented by the Differential Stipend Committee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Aaron?
I'll second.
All right, a roll call.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Mrs. Jung?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Farber?
Aye, motion carries 7-0, so we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hensons. Some important dates to know coming up. Tomorrow night is, on Tuesday, March 12th, is the Taste of Kaneland Committee. It's 6:30 to 8 at the high school in the library, and board members Junk and Rivas are two reps that have served on that thus far. So we do have the March meeting and the April meeting to close out our school year. And as you know, with the Taste of Kaneland, it's scheduled for August 25th in the fall. There will be more updates as we get closer to that date. There will be more information coming out and and more reminders and more information on what the event actually is. Saturday, we have our next round of KEA negotiations here at Harder. It will be an all-day event from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Thursday, March 21st, next week, is our last CAC before spring break, and that's 7 o'clock to 8:30, also at the high school library. And Board Member Witt is scheduled for that one
Oh, I am.
on the 21st.
Okay.
And then spring break follows right thereafter from March 25th to the 29th. After break, we do have some things taking place after break before our next school board meeting. On Sunday, the 7th, April 7th, we have two things. Number one, we have another bargaining session from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And then also on that same day, we have the 20th Annual Fine Arts Festival, and that's from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock at the high school. We just learned a little bit more about that event tonight. A lot of the same details. It's an open house format at the high school. There's a series of student art, there's displays, there's vendors there, and then we have students performing. So it's, again, at the high school open house event. You can come and go at your leisure to watch and to participate if you have students there. And the last thing I wanted to share, at the last board meeting, I shared that through January 15th through March 15th is the period for membership for CAC, FAC, Hall of Fame, all of our committees, and that period will be coming to a close on Friday, and then we'll have discussions April with each of the committee meetings, or each of the committees. They'll look at membership for next year, and then in May, you'll see any recommendations for any new committee members. And at this point, as of today, when we checked with Jen Hodak, who's our webmaster, we do have one person who submitted an application for CAC. So that's what we have so far to date with, for committee membership. And that was all that I had, unless there's any questions on those topics. Anything else? Nope, thank you.
Thank you. We had an FAC meeting last Thursday night. Mr. Carey was in attendance. We discussed three primary topics. One is we reviewed the investments for the 2018 calendar year. Two, we reviewed the grant information with some historical data showing that things are pretty much about the same for both state and federal grants. And the item that we spent the most time on was evidence-based funding. I had shared with them the same presentation that the board saw in January, and then we had some discussion around EBF.
And other than Julianne, you did a wonderful job with that presentation. There is a lot of stuff that the state still hasn't quite figured out, so I look forward to the updates once you know the answers to the questions.
It's a mystery.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Thank you.
Great.
Julianne, do you also want to give a brief update on the safety forum, how it went last week, and the attendance? Those
Yeah,
things?
thank you. I appreciate that. The safety forum was last Tuesday night, so what was that, March 5th? 5th, yep. And we had Sheriff Hain came, as well as the chief of police from Elburn, and some employees from the 911 call center, and then a couple other firemen were there. So that was wonderful with regard to our first responders. We only had about 24 parents in attendance, so that's disappointing. We had several administrators there to give overviews. I gave the overview of updates from within the district of things that we've changed within the past year. And then Deputy Conley did a great job talking about some safety issues such as vaping and social media. And then each of the levels, grade spans, gave a brief update on our ALICE procedures and training and implementation. And so that way, all parents that were in attendance would know what was happening with their students and what to expect with regard to preparedness. And then lastly, each of those parents had an opportunity to break out into small groups with the administrators, where the high school parents could go with the high school admin, middle school, elementary, and then they had a chance for some small group dialogue, asking specific questions for their individual levels. And we will be sending out some form of follow-up near the end of this week with regard to the types of questions that were asked in the small groups. So that, and we'll probably send out the presentation that was given to the parents for that night. So, it was good. Our safety task force continues to meet regularly. It was established last spring. We meet about once a month, once every 6 weeks, and we do a variety of topics depending on what we're working on and what needs to be talked about. So, we continue to work towards making progress and keeping our schools safe.
Great. And I think since our last meeting was the gallery walk as well, which I appreciated those presenters taking the time.
I want to say thanks for that also, and there were a few things that we had specific questions on, board members had at previous meetings, and I saw presentations on some of the things. So one thing I saw was a demonstration. We had a lot of questions about Canvas, and I had a couple of teachers that, first of all, thanked us for approving it and showed, you know, just how it works with Tyler and how it's more than Tyler, that they, you know, can put the assignments on there, they can actually grade them on there and actually send it out to the student through there, and then it automatically goes into their grade book and automatically goes into Tyler. So it saves quite a bit of time, you know, with the grading and things like that, because they're not having to do it in 2 different places. So that was good. And then discussions on proficiency-based and standards-based grading were enlightening, and I was just absolutely amazed at how far we've gone with personalized learning, and it was really exciting. So I want to say thanks.
Yep. And we'll have those teachers and students and administrators that led little booths or breakout sessions, they'll be here for salutes at our next meeting.
Great.
That's great. All right, anything
Thank
else? Nope. Okay, so topics for future agendas. I know we've had one that, I don't know if you want to bring it up, Dr. Layden, or?
Yeah, I can share that. As I was transitioning into the role, the high school started using a logo that, if you see the logo, it has the night head, the K, and then Knights down below it. That's been used for the last couple of years here. And one of the questions, about my second year or so, was that logo, should we or do we, or how can we get rights to it? That way we can possibly protect that trademark, if we can trademark it, and then use it for possible revenue for the district. And so one of the questions was, can we trademark it? So as I met with Maureen, we looked at it. We can trademark it, we do, and we have. So we do have the state trademark of that. We applied for that. It was a smaller fee, but we do have that. And so then we had that for a period of time. We weren't charged to do anything at that time. And then a board member recently asked me, based on that trademark, should we revisit the trademark? Should we revisit the opportunity to use that for possible revenue? And so tonight, rather than have, we don't have the information for the contract or recommendation for the money, but we do have most of that ready for the next board meeting, if indeed the board with a thumbs up show would like that. And so wanted to, rather than just assume the board wanted that and to bring it back, we wanted to kind of throw the idea out here, remind you what it was, kind of the timeline and the possibility, and then see if the board does want that. And if so, we can bring it back for discussion and a recommendation that would then probably, if the board does want to hear it and move forward with something like that, would probably take effect July 1. If there's a...
Wasn't there a legal reason, like a big reason we couldn't do it before? Because we have talked about this before.
It's been like about 4 years ago. It was
Yeah.
about the time
Yeah,
I
and
came
I
on,
thought
and I don't
there was a
remember.
big reason, or like something like, oh no, we can't.
Well, for the federal was no, but the state was yes.
Oh, okay.
So we were able to
That's
get
what I'm remembering.
the state, and I have that information.
Okay.
And if the board wants to hear more, we'll bring a presentation at the next meeting.
Yeah, I think the first one was like, when you said we don't want to get into the business of you know, receiving money or whatever.
And it was also, was it specifically unique enough? So from the federal side.
That's what it
no,
was.
But from the state, it was for the one purpose, and again, we'll share that, the one purpose
Okay.
of possibly generating revenue, and it was applied for, that we do have a trademark.
Okay.
So at that time, if it's approved, you're giving us additional information, pros and cons, all that type of
Yep,
good
that's
stuff?
what, yeah, if there's 4 board members that want to hear more about it, we will bring it with a recommendation and bring information and pros and cons and all of that at the next meeting. in
Sure.
April.
That sound good?
Yeah, might as well.
All right.
J1.
Jerry, one.
Thank you.
Anything else for topics or future agendas? No? So then we'll move on to our second opportunity for public comment. Any public comments? No? Okay, so then we do have executive session tonight. Tonight's executive session is for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity, as well as collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. So do I have a motion to go into executive session for those reasons?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mr. Lawler?
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber?
Aye.
Mrs. Witt?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.